In this presentation, I will underline the contribution of the Romanian-born painter and architect to the European and the Romanian avant-garde movements, as well as his artistic activity before leaving Romania forever in 1941, just before Romania's entry into World War II. My essay is based on materials already published on the subject, especially the book of the Romanian art critic Geo Șerban, Întâlniri cu Marcel Janco, published in 2011. I wouldn't have ever left, he confessed, if the Green Terror, meaning the Iron Guard, wouldn't have made victims even in my own family. However, my roots are still there, and I still feel how the pulse of my roots is still beating. Dada was a unique artistic movement, the most radical artistic insurrection of the 20th century, which had a major impact on that century art. It was established in Cabaret Voltaire in Zurich, Switzerland, by a group of exiled poets, painters, and philosophers who were opposed to war and aggression, thus changing the world culture. Among the founders were Marcel Janco, Tristan Tzara, Hugo Ball, Emmy Hennings, Hans Arp, Richard Huelsenbeck, Hans Richter. Dada soirees featured spontaneous poetry, avant-garde music, and mask-wearing dancers in elaborate shows. The Dadaists teased and enraged the audience through their bold defiance of Western culture and art, which they considered obsolete in view of the destruction and carnage of World War I. The Dadaists objected to the aesthetics of Western contemporary painting, sculpture, language, literature, and music. The group published articles and periodicals and mounted exhibitions. Then seeds sown in Zurich spread throughout the world, resulting in new Dada organizations in Paris, New York, Berlin, Hanover, and other places. Janco designed masks and costumes for the famous Dada balls and created abstract reliefs in cardboard and plaster. He had an eclectic and unique style in which he brilliantly combined abstract and figurative elements, expressionistic in nature. Janco confessed, "The war miseries cut me off from any resource, and I had to make a living singing in various Zurich nightclubs, old French, English, and Romanian folk music. My brother was accompanying me playing piano, and so, from bar to bar one night, he knocked on the door of Hugo Ball's tavern. I called. When he understood that I was a painter and I was frequenting the Cubists, the Futurists, and that I knew some other poets and artists from Zurich, he proposed right away that I take part in his plan to create a literary cabaret. Next day, I talked to Arp and Tzara about the project in order to convince them to take part. Tzara sensed right away its advantage. Every night new friends joined our group. The poets were singing, the writers were reading their writings in their futility, the walls were sparkling of paintings and manifests. One could hear the pieces played at piano by Hugo Ball, and there were dances on tunes by blacks and Javanese natives, masked in pieces of clothing manufactured by me. They were reciting poems on 4 voices simultaneously in 4 different languages." End of quote. Soon after the inauguration of February 5, 1916, the extravagances of the players and poets, writers were surnamed Dada, a senseless invented word attributed by some to Hazard, by others to the 2 Romanian animators who were often heard in their conversation. Dada. Marcel Janco was attracted in the beginning by the breaking of old traditions based on his insurrectional spirit. On the other hand, He was turned off by the rudimentary nihilism and the self-destructive extravagance of the new art. He became perfectly adapted to the carnival atmosphere of Cabaret Voltaire, attracted by the dynamic sense of the grotesque game of masks which he manufactured himself. But little by little he separated himself from Tristan Tzara, his former companion from Symbolul magazine in Bucharest in 1912, as soon as the Dada spirit shows signs of excessive destructiveness, detrimental to any creative activity, being rather more interested in constructivism. He prefers to be called a radical artist, but even though he deplored the diminishing of the art till the point of annihilation of the public impact, at the same time he detests the sophisticated mystification, the estranging of creativity under the effect of settling too long in hazardous areas. The Dada movement diminishes its force through the breakup of the original group already from the beginning of 1917. The first to quit is Richard Hülsenbeck, the partner of Tzara and Janco in the verbal simultaneous interventions. Later on, he moved to New York and became a psychologist. The next person to quit in 1918 was Hugo Ball himself, the owner of the cabaret, later on secluding himself into a monastery as a monk. Marcel Janco wrote to ARP on February 26 that he held on February 15 in Zurich, in front of the School of Architecture, a conference on that topic. He was pleading for intensification of the conceptual narrowing between the architecture status and sculpture and painting capacity to intervene in combating with higher efficiency of the mimetic illusionism of classic and Baroque nature. The program permits the possibility of a future aspiration towards a way of transforming the relationship between the consumer and art producers, transforming the public mentality without the trauma of the vehement and exaggerated negation sustained and pushed by Tzara. Later on, Janco made additional clarifications. In the catalogue of Dada 1916-1966 exhibition, organized in the spring of 1967 at the Museum of Modern Art in Haifa, he was describing two speeds during the process of the movement. One was exaggerated nihilist, toning the wake of the creation, the pure hazard, supported by the literary wing of the movement. The second, belonging to the visual artists, who also exasperated by the old routine, ardent supporters of innovation, but less interested in scandals and in the games of gratuitous cynicism. The clarification of Janco must be associated with Hülsenbeck's associations from Dada et Avant, where he accused openly the literary wing on aesthetic sterility and hedonism. In general, Zurich left Janco with an image of a resort inundated by frivolous action, which an artist-fashioned atmosphere protected against the war-related impediments. Accumulated unhappiness, even at the location of the events, will lead to the split and realignment within the avant-garde movement. As for the naive art and subconscious depth exposed through the prejudices exterior data against figurative art, there are notes kept from his early periods. Marcel Janco exhibits the rebellious artistic attitude, becoming one of the first promoters of abstractionism in Romania. In the avant-garde magazine Contemporaneul of June 24, 1922, he is offered clear explanations of the geometrical radicalization. I quote, "It's within inner self and personal. It starts from the line and color, just like music starts from the sound. As And just as music groups creative harmonious sounds, the abstract painting displays the lines and colors towards a harmonious result. Thus, being freed, painting becomes an abstract construction, like an unarranged symphony. More explicitly, the sense of the new program is formulated in certain notes with the starting point in the geometrical construction instated by Cubism, with which Dada and especially Marcel Janco maintain structural affinities. I am quoting from Contemporáneo of December 1926. The line, the volumes, and the color are plastic elements and cannot be found in nature, but in a disorganized and unconscious fashion. Together, and organized visual elements represents the basic problem of the visual arts. Starting from vision, the art creates visual art realities independent from visual perception. A rendition of nature does not imply artistic beauty. Visual art represents a construction of the intellect, not only of the human feelings. About virtuosity of the colors, there is a fundamental difference between their physical nature and their artistic power. An absolute distinction among the colors does not exist. Many times a red is rather a blue and a green is rather a yellow. About the power of expression of colors, one should never talk about individually, as they should be grouped in accords. In his model, the place of the passionate artist of romantic origin, lonesome and pushed by the bohemian environment of the art merchants, is taken by the creator of the art, overtaken by the profoundly human belief, rigorous to the asceticism, having as prototype Brâncuș, about whom he said, I am quoting, "He loves life and nature with a virile wisdom. His love is not ecstatic, passive, romantic." It was also in the first generation full of ambition, among which to get rid of the eternal slavery of Parisian imitation of good taste. Marcel Janco's generation was oriented towards revolt on a path towards revelation, thought, and pain. It's hard to establish the percentage of how much Easerism he has acquired, but his doctrinal affiliation to his master remained unquestionable. Through Joseph Easer first, Marcel Janco got close to the new art creeds, and through him he acquired a repulsion towards the scholar dogma and the stigma of academic prejudices. Until the distinct clarification of the opposition, there was an inoffensive parallelism vaguely marked by independent gestures. The Dadaist Chronicle, for instance, records in June 1918 several meetings with separatist flavors held by Marcel Janco. However, it was his poster that at the same time announced the agitated night when Țara stunned the audience with some explosive declaration that were to speed up the separation process. In December, the painter was still creating the front cover of the third issue of Dada. Then next month he made known his intention to quit the movement, exhibiting at the prestigious Kunsthaus of Zurich with the group Das Neue Leben. By April 1919, the dispute between the two Romanian artists of renewal was already in public. Back in Bucharest in 1922, Marcel Janco acted simultaneously as painter, graphic artist, text illustrator, stage designer, architect, urbanist, public speaker, and commentator on current topics of fine arts. He opposed all those skills and even more a very dynamic animator, promoter of a modern and flexible view oriented towards the emancipation of the creative energies from the risk of limitations and marginalization, provincialism, apathy, comfort. He was preoccupied to get rid of anything that could diminish the chances of his work to answer the exigence of the authentic values and the communications with a pretentious public. The publication Contemporanul, edited by Marcel Janco, Ion Vinea and Jacques Costin, was the most lasting among all the avant-garde Romanian interbellum publications for close to 10 years and with over 100 editions. Its most important contribution was in the area of visual art. Numerous internal and international exhibitions were dealt with, along with nightly poetical, theatrical and musical avant-garde gatherings, architecture innovations, decorative art, which took place under the auspices, the motto behind it being Marcel Janco. On his return to Romania in 1922, he brought with him a wealth of knowledge, experience and international relationships. The break from Tristan Tzara Dadaism was based on his moderate and constructivist position. Marcel Janco performed his activity as a modern mediator between mainstream and avant-garde. He was named by Brunea Fox as the portraitist of the Romanian writers. He practiced a mix of abstractionism, realism, post-impressionism, cubism, expressionism, etc., being at the same time the most distinguished theoretician and promoter of the constructivism in Romania. The emergence of Marcel Janco in the local artistic environment upset the native art atmosphere, strictly tied up by the rural and archaic rigid moldings and customs. The dynamism is the quality based on which he imposed his way of expressing himself in an amalgam of lines and colors, in the severe composition of cross-intersection of planes combined and superseded. To Janco, it doesn't count as much the new artistic procedure as the actual pulse, translated at the level of a superior synthesis. Marcel Janco is searching for partnership everywhere, plotting an unprecedented exhibition in Bucharest with participation of his closest team members of the Zurich campaign: Hans Arp, Paul Klee, Hans Richter, Kurt Schwitters, Viking Egeling, Kashak Lajos, Karl Tige. The opening took place in November 1924, and among the native painters were Arthur Siegel, Mati Stoich, Victor Brauner, M. H. Maxi, Milica Petrașcu. Under the patronage of some of the Brancusi's sculptures, placed on purpose in dominant spots, drawing the attention that the new spirit, the modernity, was far from having to be imported, received itself important Romanian support, fully recognized as being at world level. Just on the day of Eugen Ionescu's comment, Marcel Janco was holding a conference on the topic of modern visual art. In a total filled-up room, the painter was returning to the legitimate optional preoccupations from the Cubist revolution through re-establishment, the connection with a great primitive tradition. I quote, "Starting from Cézanne and especially from Picasso, one can assist to a rebirth of a strict visual art. In fact, this represented the signal of a larger action of public dialogues. Now, he is considered among the initiators of the Art, Philosophy and Literature Association Criterion. A more vehement satiric accent marks part of his work exhibited in 1937 under the feelings of dark premonition of the emergence of the extremist forces. It's the moment of consistent presence in the papers of his graphic art on the current acute social topics: unemployment, the uncertainty of peace, political demagogy, and the misery of incompetence, in clearly anti-dictatorial publications and anti-fascist magazines like Fac la Cuvântul Liber and Timpul. A bright note brings the exhibition in 1939 along with Milica Petrașcu, with works inspired by a recent visit to the Middle East in 1938. It will follow the darkest period in his life, with the fascist dominance of Romania and his forced exit from his country, as I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation. Thank you for your attention.